All right, first and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that rule well, and salutations to the elect pushing His truth to the four corners of the earth in truth and in sincerity. In this particular video, I want to talk about the horrors of the so-called white man that he has done to the so-called Native Americans and the so-called Seminole Indians, which are Israelites, tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad. All right, and the Trail of Tears. If you don't know about the Trail of Tears, we're about to play a video real shortly. But I want to get this scripture right here first. So let's get into it. Numbers 35 and 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land. So this land is right here is defiled. You know, Esau came over here and butt raped, robbed, and murdered, and stole and destroyed the so-called Native Americans and the so-called Seminole Indians, man. He came over here and took everything and killed and raped, you know, played soccer, kickball, you know, with the natives and the Indian, Seminole Indians' heads, man. Cut babies out the womb. So there was a thriving population, you know, Israel. But then at the end, you know, right now you look at what's the population of Native Americans right here in America. It's like 1 million to close to 2 million. Esau killed a lot of our people, man. So this land is defiled by blood. And the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So the Lord has to put you to death. The Lord's going to put you to death. So-called white man, woman, and child. You're thinking you're going to thrive here forever. You're not. You know, we know that you're the man of sin. By the power and spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, He has revealed you. He has revealed to us that we are the Israelites. And that revealed you that you are the man of sin. People are getting that. Those small hats over there in the land of Israel, they're not the real Jews. We're the real Jews. We're the real Israelites. You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, we're the real Israelites. So who are they? They're Esau, Edom, man. That man of sin, the wicked. All right. Let's get another script. Slakia. This is Job chapter 9:24, and we read, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? He is Esau, Edom. That's who the earth was given into. Who runs the earth right now? All right? That's Esau, Edom, man. It's given inside of the hand of the wicked. And this is another telltale sign of who it is. He covereth the faces and the judges thereof. Right? He sought to paint out the likeness of his people in the scriptures. He made himself the angels. He made himself the saints. He made himself the Most High. He made himself the Son. All right? And he covered the faces of the judges thereof, because guess what? When you go back in history, you know, you're looking at certain, you can look it up, you can Google it, them actually sitting there and painting, you know, pale skin on the prophets, man, which were Israelites. And you can tell that there's just Jake sitting there, you know? So, yeah. But this is Esau, Edom right here, man. Let me get one more script. And, well, we'll get this one right quick and the other one. And then we'll play the video. And then we'll exit it. All right. This is Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and start at 8. And then shall that wicked be revealed, right? Whom the Lord shall consume. Oh, no, that's not it. All right, here we go. This is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall come, except there come a falling away first. We didn't know we was Israelites at the time, but through the power and spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we know our identity now. You know what I mean? And as we learn our identity, we know his identity. And that man of sin be revealed. Right? The son of perdition. That's the man of sin right there. That's Esau. Right? He's being revealed right now. The son of perdition. You know, perdition, it means destruction, man. All right? Everywhere he goes, he but rapes, robs, murders, and destroys. You know what I mean? Hey, don't forget, he's the one who created the atom bomb. You know what I mean? He the one that really talked that nuke talk. You know what I mean? Shaking kingdoms, man. Well, and that weapon in the scriptures is also called the waster, to destroy the land, the whole land. Yo, Esau, Edom comes up with this stuff, man. Let's get Habakkuk, Salakia. Habakkuk chapter 2 and 12, and we read, woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establish a city by iniquity. Right, woe to him. That means destruction to him. Esau, you got nothing to look forward to but destruction, man. Recompense, payback for what you have done, man, to the Israelites, man, and the whole. Right now, we're focusing on the so-called Native Americans and Seminole Indians, man, what you did, man, and that Trail of Tears, man. A lot of rape, a lot of murder happened, man. I'm going to play a video that's not going to reveal everything that happened, but, hey, a lot of things happened. They had to walk through the snow. They had to walk barefooted, dying of disease and shit, which Esau, you brought over here, man. All right? There was a shortage of carriages, so why they be like, well, some of the sick and the old and shit can ride in the carriages? You think they was top 5, star carriages or some shit? No. It probably had holes in it. They were probably getting rained on too, and there wasn't enough of them. So, you still had old, sick, wounded, the young walking out there in them harsh conditions, man. 6,000, I believe 5,000 to 6,000 natives and Seminole Indians, man, died, man, on that walk. Because Esau, you come over here and establish an order that they got to give up their lands and shit like that, man. Woe to him that makes unrighteous decrees, man. It's unrighteous, man, for you to come over here and just take everything from them, man. You broke every treaty that you wrote with the so-called natives, man. And guess what? The Lord's going to get you back for that. Woe to a city, destruction to him, Esau, that buildeth a town with blood, man, and establish a city by iniquity.
Walk down this trail of tears. On May 28, 1830, U.S. President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, a document that authorized the American government to extinguish Indian titles to lands in the nation's southeast. That act also authorized the president to negotiate with native tribes in order to gain access and make improvements to their lands, as well as offer resettlement funds to those tribes and groups willing to move west. Even in its own time, the act was highly controversial. While many Americans, particularly those in the South and the largest state, Georgia, supported its passage, many others opposed the act, including a large number of Christian missionaries and several sitting members of Congress. Indeed, it was only after a long, bitter series of debates that the act finally was passed by the legislature. While its ultimate goal was to turn those lands over to settlers, the Indian Removal Act did not explicitly grant Jackson permission to forcibly remove native inhabitants. Nonetheless, the 5 so-called civilized tribes, which included the Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole, as well as the Wyandot, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Shawnee, and Lenape, were all ultimately removed from their lands, and force was often a major factor. The tribes were sent west on a trip that would eventually become known as the Trail of Tears. Native Americans.
They have a boiling hate for you as well. They just don't hate the so-called black people. They hate you Hispanic tribes, and they hate you so-called Indians, Native Americans, and Seminole Indians, man. They hate y'all too. Y'all are Israelites. And Esau took our life ever since you go back and read it in Genesis. The days, he said, the days of my father, I had mourning. I'm mourning right now, roughly paraphrasing the scripture. And after that, he's going to go kill and seek the life of Jacob, man. And he does that until this day. He does that until this day. So this is why he hates you. This is why he can do all these things to you, man. And he will forever hate you. All right? So don't get it twisted. Don't be trying to be like them and all that. Especially you northern tribes, man. Start trying to dress like him. Y'all say this little slick shit like you gotta better the race, which means getting lighter skin and all this other shit. Hey, man, go ahead and see what he gonna give you. What type of gift Esau gonna give you? Look at his track record. He ain't gonna do nothing but destroy you. All right? You trim your ways to seek love from the damn enemy. All right?
Points along the journey, they were forced to go many miles off the main route in order to avoid towns and cities where residents simply did not want them to come through. In some of these places, the landowners would charge them fees to cross over their lands. And not surprisingly, those fees weren't cheap. For example, after traveling through Tennessee and Kentucky, the Cherokee reached southern Illinois. But they had to cross the Ohio River to get there. To cross the river on a ferry, the Cherokee were charged $1 a head, the equivalent of $22.26 today. Other users of the ferry, meanwhile, typically paid a mere 12 cents, which was the equivalent of $2.67 today. A soldier named John G. Burnett, a private in Abraham McClellan's company who was assigned to help translate on the Trail of Tears, recorded his memories of the trail on his 80th birthday. In those memoirs, he pulled no punches, and based on his first-hand knowledge, he characterized the trail as the most brutal order in the history of American warfare. While Burnett's recorded memories provide many deeply moving and personal details from the trail, it is his recollections of the brutal weather faced by the travelers that he refers to the most. And the natives who walked the trail were, indeed, forced to face harsh weather. In May of 1838, for example, the Cherokee were rounded up and put into stockades in Cleveland, Tennessee, until October of that year, when they finally began the trail. This means that they had to complete the 1,000-mile journey in the dead of winter. As Burnett remembers, many were forced to walk in bare feet with only the thinnest blankets for warmth, as the sleet and snow fell on them. Due to the cold and exposure, many contracted illnesses like pneumonia. An untold number succumbed as a result. Picture this scene. After being removed from their ancestral homelands and forced by the U.S. government to head to an unknown place in order to survive, hundreds of sick and dying Native Americans struggled to travel across miles of freezing, desolate land. And as they persevere, spectators stand along the sides of the road, offering no help or relief, but rather staring on in silence, watching for their own interest. It sounds cruel, but that's exactly the way it happened. Consider, for example, the testimony of Samuel Cloud, who turned 9 years old on the Trail of Tears. His story was recorded by his great-grandson, and among the many sad reminiscences that Cloud recounts, the very ending of his story stands out in its perversity. Cloud recalled that by the end, he hated the white people who lined the roads in their woolen clothes that kept them warm, watching the Indians pass. Native Americans weren't the only ones who wound up walking the Trail of Tears. Piling one injustice on top of another, many of the Cherokees brought their slaves along the trail with them as they moved from their homeland in Tennessee to the land allotted to them in Oklahoma. These enslaved African Americans were not only tasked with dealing with the incredibly inhospitable conditions of the trail, but they also had to serve their Cherokee masters while they traveled. They hunted for food and prepared it, washed clothes, cared for the sick, guarded camps, and served as scouts along the trail. Along the trail, pretty much every essential was in short supply. Travelers had no regular or easy access to food, water, shelter, clothes, or medicine. And very little game could be found and killed along the trail to supplement the meager available rations. As a result, many died of starvation along the way, and even coffins for the dead weren't readily available. In addition, there was a terrible drought that same year, and the first group dispatched along the trail in August of 1838 had to return to the base camp in present-day Chattanooga, Tennessee, because the creeks and rivers were dried up. Dehydration, along with starvation, wound up killing many on the Trail of Tears. Private John Burnett remembers taking part in only one confrontation on the trail, one with a teamster who was whipping an elderly man to hurry along into a wagon. Private Burnett would later write that the sight of that old and nearly blind creature quivering under the lashes of a bullwhip was too much for him. Having reached his breaking point with the cruelty, the private started a fight with the teamster in order to defend the man, sustaining an injury to his face in the process. And Burnett's account isn't the only one of its kind. Conflicts, either with brutal teamsters or with local militias, were regular dangers to those that walked the Trail of Tears. Many accounts of the Trail of Tears include a discussion of the lack of wagon space available to the travelers. Because there weren't enough wagons, like pretty much every other necessity on the trail, only the very young, the very old, the sick, and nursing mothers were allowed to ride in them. As a result, the majority of those forcibly relocated along the trail were forced to cover 1,000 miles on foot. And if that wasn't bad enough, many were forced to make the walk without shoes. A traveler from Maine happened upon one of the caravans in Kentucky and wrote that even aged females, apparently nearly ready to drop into the grave, were traveling with heavy burdens attached to their back in their bare feet. The route that most Cherokee took west used what is now called the Northern Route, which wound its way through Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas before reaching Oklahoma. The distance totaled roughly 1,000 miles. The Cherokee anticipated this route taking 2 months for completion. However, as a result of the terrible traveling conditions, meager rations, and illnesses, the journey took nearly 4 months to complete. If you do the math, it means that the travelers had a meager daily mileage of between 8 and 9 miles.
Audible is the best place to listen for everyone. For story people, comedy people.
The passage of the Indian Removal Act didn't leave the Native Americans with a lot of great options. Their choices were basically to move or to stand and fight against an overwhelmingly more powerful force. Most chose to relocate, but not all. In Florida, for example, the Seminole Indians decided to go to war against the U.S. government rather than be removed from their homeland. When the U.S. Army arrived in Florida in 1835, ready to enforce the treaty requiring the Seminoles to give up their land, they were ambushed by 180 Seminole warriors. In response, the U.S. government spent over $20 million in war expenses battling the Seminoles. The war, which lasted until 1842, left more than 1,500 soldiers dead and resulted in the removal of many Seminoles. However, some Seminoles were able to remain, setting up communities deep in the Florida Everglades. Historians estimate that roughly 4,000 Cherokees died on the Trail of Tears. Some died from exposure to the elements, others from starvation, others from illness, and still others from their advanced age coupled with the brutal conditions. Because of the frigid temperatures and wintry conditions, those who were buried were interred in shallow graves, with very little ceremony along the way. By the 1840s, tens of thousands of indigenous Americans had been forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands at the southeast to their new home across the Mississippi River, which was known as Indian Territory. At the time, the U.S. government repeatedly swore that this new location would never be encroached on by settlers. But as we know today, it did not go that way. As the United States continued to pursue its manifest destiny and expand further westward, the so-called Indian Territory got progressively smaller and smaller. Finally, on September 17, 1907, Oklahoma became the 46th U.S. state, and the Indian Territory was officially no more. The path of the Trail of Tears ran through 9 separate states: Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. Now known as the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, the route is maintained and run by the National Park Service. While it is no longer possible to walk the entire trail as it was traveled by Native Americans and African Americans in the 1830s, various portions of the path are still accessible on foot, by bicycle, on horseback, or in a car.
I hope it was edifying. And with that, I'm going to say Shalom.